So at Halo, we love interesting people, and one thing we love more than interesting people is interviewing interesting people. So we're here today with Mark to go through a little bit about what gets him up in the morning and his path to success. So one thing I really want to start with is your beginnings, really, and it's how you got into sales, how you manifested the path ahead of you when you were at school, because let's face it, that's where we get a lot of our, that's where our beginnings, our motivators come from. Can you tell us a little bit about that time?
Yeah, I mean, being 100% honest with you, I didn't leave school with a huge amount. But I knew in my mind and the way I was is that, sales or selling was always something I wanted to be involved in. And I felt it's something that I was good at. So in the very early days, even when I was at school, I used to work as a market trader on a store for a guy just selling.
What were you selling?
Cordless telephones, TVs, microwaves, all this sort of stuff.
Pound for a pound?
Yeah, exactly like that, exactly like that, yeah. And from that side, it sort of gave me a real insight to sort of think, that's what I love doing. I love doing that. I love communicating with people like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was it though? What gave you the thrill?
It's the buzz, isn't it? It's the buzz of selling an item. It's the buzz of being able to give a consumer or give someone something that they do need. And realistically, from my side, I just really enjoyed the interaction with people. And I think from then, it made me sort of realise that that's the role I wanted to go down. And I knew without, I didn't have any qualifications behind me, I needed to start at the bottom. So from my side, I originally got into like an engineering company,
right? Okay.
Stamping valves, putting PSI ratings on valves, and I think that's how I kicked off. But I knew within this business, I knew there was a big sales department.
Yeah.
So I went into that company and worked my way through. And kept hassling the sales director to say, are there any roles? Are there any roles? Can I get into sales? Probably annoyed him for about a year and a half.
Yeah, but there's something in that, because I think there's that whole drive for success and drive to better yourself. I don't think everybody has it now, and the pandemic has affected a lot of that. When you were that young, do you still see that actually we've got that you need to show that willingness to learn?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, personally, I'm a very driven individual. I've always been like that. I think I was born like that. I just think that, and I think I wanted to have, do nice things and have nice things. And I knew the only way of doing that would be by working hard. And I think back at that time, in that particular company, that's where having that drive of keep going in and speaking to people and saying, can I have an opportunity in sales? Just give me a chance to be able to get into the team. That in itself created my whole, the very beginning really. It gave me the chance to get into there, and I joined that sales team. I think at the time I was, how old would I have been there? I would have been about 18, I think, when I finally got there. I started there at 16, so it took me 18 months. And then I finally got into a sales department, and I was amongst that, a lot of these guys were engineers with degrees and everything else, but I was suddenly within a sales environment, and from then I just realised that, commercial and sales and stuff was just something that I loved.
Yeah, okay. And what was the next step then when you left there?
Well, I think one of the things that I did is that within that business, and people that might hear this now will probably laugh, because I was still very young, and I think I was sort of pushing to try and get into this sort of sales department. And then from there, I wanted to then realise, and I thought, you know what, I see these guys turning up in, at the time, probably a brand new Cavalier or whatever, and thinking, oh my God, I want to have a company car, I want to have this, I want to have that. So again, that drive from my perspective made me go to the sort of hierarchy and say, how do I become that? And I've always been someone that's I'm inspired so much by people, and even still now, I always inspired by people, because I think if you stop being inspired by people, that will lose your drive. And I think it doesn't matter where you get to, you've always got to have someone that you're aspiring to try and think, how do I do that? And I've always been one of these people that asks those questions. So I remember at the time asking, how do I get on the road? How do I get a company car? How do I do this? And I remember at the time that the person said to me, look, you're 20 years old, no one's going to take you seriously. So it's not going to happen, so you've got to stay in the sales department. And I think from that perspective, what I ended up then doing was saying, well, fine. And this is how I ironically got into this sort of logistics, sort of parcel type world, let's call it, is I went out and found, there was a local company to us in Southampton who were looking for a sales representative to sell freight forwarding.
Right, okay, yeah.
And I went in and met them, and as I said, I was 20, very green, had no idea about logistics, shipping, nothing, and saw them and said, look, give me a chance, just give me a chance. I'm sure I can do good things for this particular depot as long as I understand the product. And that's really important, understanding the product and understanding the benefits of what it does and the benefits that it can bring other people is just so key. And yeah, ironically, she offered me the job, and that was my entry into the world of logistics.
Oh, right, because there's something quite interesting here. I think you're fueled, just from knowing you, not necessarily by materialistic things. I think you're fueled by people and also morals and ethics and things like that. So what is it you look for, particularly when you're looking to onboard people into your business? What is it you're looking for when you have that initial interview, normally at Starbucks?
Yeah, of course, yeah, exactly. I mean, we've always tried to, even in the stuff in the company we do now in AGL, is that we just look for people that, from our side, have that passion for work and want to progress. One of the things we talk about with people when they, even in an interview process, is, what are your aspirations? Where do you want to get to? What's your, if someone joins you in a role of X, we always go, what's your role of Y? Where do you want to get to with this sort of thing? It's really important. And I think when any person joins a business, you've got to have that career path for them. It's something potentially, as I said earlier, I had to fight for all that and sort of go, what can I do? What can I do? Where I think what we try and do, I try and install within the business is to make sure that we're in a position where we're saying to people, what is it you need? What is it you need? Where do you want to get to? How far do you want to go in this business? Because if we can then do that, we already know there's that individual that's joined us. We know what their plan of action is. And we also can help them, whether that's by sending them to, get sort of extra through college or giving them extra qualifications in a certain area that they need. I just think it's really, really important because but the key thing for me is just seeing a person, no matter what level they come into at the business, is just seeing that they have that drive to go, this is what I want to try and do, because that's sort of in theory everything that I had. Well,
I think it's interesting also with how I've watched your business for a few years. You do have a very optimistic outlook, which I guess will come from your sales background, but also you're very motivated for growth, aren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like there's no ceiling. And do you think that's a mindset thing? Or was it something you've always had?
No, I think AGL in particular we've had unbelievable growth. But I think, as I said, it is, without sounding, it is so much down to what we were talking about a minute ago. It's down to the people that we have within the business, And I think, we have had, we've had a bit of organic growth naturally as a company. But it is a sort of, it's something that we truly believe in. The software that we have in the business now is something we truly believe that brings a huge benefit, not just to businesses, but also to consumers. I mean, we all buy online, everyone's. We're all buying online, we're all buying products online and so on. And we know that our software brings huge benefits outside of anything else. And that's sort of key for us, really.
And with regard to benefits and obviously the sales process, what is it that you're looking to identify with a new client when they come on board? Because you're in a position now where not necessarily you can cherry pick your clients, but there's got to be something you see in somebody or their company that ignites your interest.
Well, because we're as a business, AGL is a multi-carrier parcel management company, so it's software. So we don't, we always say to people, we don't own planes, trucks, or we don't own anything from that perspective. We are a software business first and foremost, and the teams that we have in place here, we are sort of looking at customers, and generally these are customers where they have certain types of commodities, so they're not just sending all pretty boxes, they're sending large, small, long length parcels and so on. And they're the sort of customers we look at, because these clients potentially are maybe using 3 or 4 or 5 carriers across multiple systems, using multiple customer care centres, getting multiple invoices coming in. And obviously what our software does is AGL software plugs directly into their sort of warehouse management system, wherever that might be, and in theory gives that customer the choice. So if they want to use carrier A, they use carrier A, carrier B, carrier C, and so on. But the most important thing is it's all under one roof. So, if they've got a customer care query, if they've got a problem, if there's any sort of claims, if there's any issues going on, they only ever work with AGL and they only deal with us. And, there's not many companies around like us that do this sort of stuff. And I think it is a huge USP.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think, important is making sure you have people in the right sort of areas, and that includes the likes of myself. So, I sit as the CEO of this business, but actually what I do day to day is more around the commercial, sales, and strategic stuff. When the business was probably at around about probably, we're just short of 40 staff now, but I think at the time we were probably around about 15, maybe 18 sort of staff members. I realised very quickly that actually running the business, so dealing with the whole operational, financial running of the company day to day, actually, from my side, I actually thought there's much better people out there that can do that. And that's a big thing to say, because there's a lot of people out there that would go, no, it's my business, and and I'll run it, or Matt, my business partner, could have said, no, I can do it. We actually looked at that, the pair of us, and said, actually, there's although I'm sat there running the business, was more important that we had someone that could take the business forward outside of us, because what it was actually doing was running the business day to day, was sort of making myself in particular not be able to do any sales, which is what I love, as we spoke about in this interview. Couldn't do any sort of commercial stuff, no strategic stuff. It was more doing with running the operations of the business and dealing with HR and dealing with the day-to-day financials of the business, which is something that, there was other people out there I felt that were way, way better than me that could do that. So 2 years ago, we brought in a managing director, Chris, and he come in and he's far better at doing it than I am. But what we saw then, sort of 2.5 years ago, probably one of our biggest growths has been since he's come into the business. And one, because he's taken over running AGL from a day-to-day perspective, but actually what it's freed sort of myself up and freed Matt up to do is all the stuff that actually we sort of specialise in, which is growing the business, coming up with ideas, strategic stuff, creating new ideas for the software developers and stuff like that. And that's what we've done now. And when you talk about sort of how a business, or what a business looks like in the future, AGL, in my opinion, is going to be and continue to be a hugely successful company, and that's because I believe that myself and Matt have put the right people in place.
And is that what really triggers the culture of the business? Because there is a strong culture at AGL, isn't there? Sort of teamwork, innovation, customer experience team is paramount. Yeah.
Well, I mean, everyone's treated the same, so there's not, and I'm not saying in other businesses it's not like this, but there's no egos in AGL. There's nothing like that. There's no, we're a team, and we've got the, sound corny, the hashtag Team AGL that we've got. But there are no egos in our business. There are no one trying to be something, because we knock that out very, very quickly to make sure that doesn't happen. So that's what I think creates that team mentality. We do lots of events, and we're looking to try and do more events. We do lots of incentives for the staff. We try and make the culture within the business a really nice place to come, because as everyone always says, you spend most of your time in work. So if you're getting up every morning and you're not wanting to come into work, then part of that is a huge issue. So that's why we spend a lot of time making sure that the people within the business, and we ask them all the time. We say, what other things do you think we could do? Is there events you think we could go to? And one of the things with these new people that have just joined the business, one of the questions that was asked in the interview was, what sort of events do you have within AGL? What sort of team interactions do you have? So it's a big part of any business now. And I think having the right culture in the company is, once again, crucial to any success.
So Mark, I'd definitely like to get an idea of your measurement of success. Somebody much smarter than me once said success is a journey. And so when it comes to kind of AGL first and then yourself, what do you see as a success?
It's a hard question, because I think with success, you could look at our business now and go, we've done all right, we're doing well, we've got a nice number of employees, it's a nice business, we've been successful in creating that company. I think the drive in me probably wants to take the business further and further and further. What realistically success looks like within AGL is really hard to say, actually, because from my side is that I just want to continue to grow the business as big as we can get it in a structured way. Hopefully continue to create local jobs for the local community and so on. And I think, I really enjoy work. I enjoy going to work. I love working. Although this is, a place of work you go to, I love working. I enjoy going into work every single day. And as I said, it doesn't feel like it's work. And there's that quote that everyone always says, isn't it? I forget what it is about, you know, when you're working every
you
day.
enjoy what you do, you never work a day.
Yeah, and it's like that, you know, and I really do enjoy what we do within the business. So what does success look like? Success for me is just continuing long-term growth of AGL and continuing and taking on, you know, the right people for our sort of journey, and making sure that, you know, we continue to develop our software, which is developing all the time, to make sure, you know, we continue to provide, you know, e-commerce companies and consumers the best possible delivery service, really.
So on a personal note then, what would your ideal day be? Because we hear time and time again, you've got to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you've got to be working 16 hours a day. But what do you think about that?
Well, see, I've never done that, and I've never been that way. You know, I see stuff a lot online, and people go, I'm in at 5 and I finish at 9, and all that sort of stuff. And listen, everyone's got their own journey and everyone works in their own way. Again, I was taught many years ago, someone said to me, work smart. If you work smart, you'll be all right. And what working smart meant for me is, to give you an idea, I drop my kids off at school every day, and I pick them up most days if I can. But what I try and do is, within those periods of, let's say, that 5 hours or 6 hours during that day, whatever that might be, I get enough work done, enough smart work done during that period, meaning that I can still have that work-life balance, you know. I've always been, there's no point, you know, having a business or being an entrepreneur or whatever that might be, or whatever you want to call it, if, you know, you're working from, you know, 7 in the morning until 8 at night, and then you're not seeing your family. Because why do we all do this?
Yeah.
Why do we do it? You know, why do you do it? You do it, you've got your own, Halo's an unbelievable business, it's just growing in itself. You know, we're watching your journey, and you do it for your family. And that's exactly why we all do it for work. So, you know, one thing we try and instill within AGL is trying to have that work-life balance. And it's like you know, we've just taken on a load of new sort of business development managers or new business managers within the business. And, you know, one of the conversations I had with them literally only yesterday was, you know, I said to them, look, I don't need to know if you're leaving early, an hour early. I don't need you to call me if you're going to your sister's barbecue on a Friday at 3 o'clock, whatever that might be. Realistically, if you give people that work-life balance and you don't micromanage people, that in itself makes your business a success.
Yeah.
Because that's an individual thing that, as a person, if you've got pressure on you saying you've got to be here and you've got to do this and you've got to hit this and you've got to do that, it doesn't always work. And I think that's always been my thing, is work smart. And if you can work smart, you don't need to be doing the hours that you're talking about, because that realistically, and again, this is only my opinion, I don't think it's necessarily benefiting yourself.
Yeah.
And I think there are better ways of doing things. But I understand all businesses are different, and, you know, all businesses start at different times and everything else. But I just think working smart is the key, and that is something that was installed in me, you know, very, very young age, to make sure you're just very, very clever how you do it. And that for me is you know, is paid really well.
So when it comes to giving advice to your younger self, or even your children, what advice would you give them? Say they're finishing school, you know, what would you say to yourself first?
I mean, I think it is a hard question, that, because the world has changed a lot since I was at school, where you could leave school and jump out at 15, 16 and jump into a job. It's not as easy to do that now, and I understand that. But I think for me is that it comes back to that same word, drive. You know, you've just got to put yourself in the mix. You've just got to have that drive within you to go, I'm just going to ask a question and be, you know, I love that program, Ted Lasso. And in that program, one of the big things he talks about is, you know, be curious and not judgmental. And anyone that's seen it, you know, Ted Lasso, I think, is one of the best physical programs, even for your mental health. It's one of the best programs you can ever watch. And I think for me, it's very much around that. It's that, you know, I would be saying to anyone is that, you know, my children or whoever, I'd be saying, just from your side, always be curious of everything. Always look at stuff and go, you know, if you see someone that's doing well, or if you see someone that's in a position where they're in a job that you like, or you see something, you know, explore that. You know, drop a message, drop an email. You know, speak to them, approach them in the street, all this sort of stuff, because it's always people in the world these days that they might see someone who might be, I don't know, wearing a nice suit or driving a nice car or got a nice watch on, whatever, and they'll be judgmental about that, and they'll go, oh, look at him or look at her or whatever that might be. But actually be curious. Because I look at that and go, well, hold on, how did you get that nice, you know, Apple Watch you're wearing there? Or how did you get, you know, how did you get this particular car? How did you manage to go on this particular? It's all about that stuff, because that gets back to the bit we're talking about the aspiring bit. Because if they give you the sort of information on that and they explain what's what, I think it's really, really important, because that information that you get and that information that they feed you, that's what you've got to grasp onto.
Yeah.
And that is what your drive is.
Yeah.
Because that bit is you look at it and go, okay, so he's managed to do this, and it's all about being inspired. And that's the original question, is be curious of people, ask questions and go, that's the key thing, and just have that drive in you, because what's the saying they say, you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
And realistically, sometimes you just got to, ask the question, and who knows what happens.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. What do you do to relax though? What do you do in your spare time?
Well, I do. My wife will probably laugh at me saying this, but I do run.
Right.
I do sort of not in any way, shape or form of sort of fast running, but I do sort of 5Ks, park runs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I swim quite a bit, so I try to swim sort of 2 or 3 times a week if I can.
Yeah.
Quite enjoy it. Dog walks and stuff like that. I think it's again, really important part of any successful person who's got a business, or any person that's within a company. Exercise is just so huge for your mental health. If you talk to anyone, I sadly can't do this, but if ever I do get up at 6 a.m. and go for a run and come back, how amazing you feel and how focused you feel is incredible. But I also understand that's a rarity, because life just doesn't allow that sometimes. So what ends up happening is you sort of will run around lunchtime or whatever you might do. But I think exercise is really, really key, and I think is a massive part in. Exactly that. Yeah, that wasn't arranged. But I think it's so important, because going back to what we talk about here is being smart working and being focused.
Yeah.
Exercise is a huge part of that.
Yeah. What's your thing? Because we're in a very interesting economic climate at the moment, a very interesting political one as well.
Yeah.
What do you see in the future? I'm not asking you to predict the next 10 years, but in the next year to 18 months, particularly in your area, which is logistics and technology of logistics, what do you see the future looking like?
I mean, at the minute, it's the economic world is in a bit of sort of turmoil, thanks to our friend overseas and stuff. Yeah, and obviously because of what we do, because we have a freight division which is part of our group as well. Yeah. Which obviously is all the containers, the air freight and the sea freight. So, but more on maybe the e-commerce side is, I think I just see it. I do see it, that side of the business, because everyone shops online now. Yeah. And certainly since COVID and everything else, everyone shops online. And I think more and more people now, are going on that route. So I think, from an e-commerce perspective, that's what you're asking. I just see it just continuing to fly. There's, and obviously with how huge now with TikTok and Instagram and all the influencers and everything else, how humongous that is. I learned firsthand very recently. I went to the, I don't know a huge amount about YouTubers or nothing like that, and I went to my children took me to a Sidemen tournament up in Wembley. Right, okay. Sell out 99,000 people that were YouTubers. And if I'm honest, I couldn't believe it. I was blown away. It was absolutely nuts. But I think, again, for me, talking about what we were saying about earlier, about aspiring and looking at stuff, it made me think, well, how did they do that? And how did they, it's just all this stuff's interesting. And I think all of these particular YouTubers, they have merchandising, they have online shops, they have all this stuff, and that's all part of that e-commerce world. Yeah. So from an e-commerce point of view, I just see, from our side, it just continuing to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. Yeah. As from an economic sort of thing in our whole world, I think, like probably the rest of the world at the minute, we're all a bit clueless of where things are going. So watch this space, I'd probably say.
Well, Mark, that's been really, really insightful.
No problem.
Thank you very much for taking the time.
No worries, no worries.
We've got so much to talk about. We'll do another one.
Lovely, take care.